Xenobiologist Urok had always considered himself lucky to be an orc. It was how he got into the premier university, at the central cluster, in spite of his testing scores being only in the 95th percentile, because of a hollowball scholarship. Orc marksmanship was second only to their immense physical strength in terms of sporting. It was how he wrangled a deep space scanning assignment, on the basis that few habitable worlds were more harsh than his home planet of Morag, and even the most aggressive pre-agricultural Sophans would hesitate before attacking anyone of his immense size. And now, much to his great excitement, he was part of the expedition to make contact with the second deaf-old sapient the cluster had encountered, the humans of Sol 3. It was enough excitement that he didn't even complain about the meagre accommodations on board the modified cargo hauler they were forced to use as a docking shuttle. It was large enough that he only had to stoop on board instead of crawl, but the chest was still designed for the Eferti who had funded the expedition, and he needed no fewer than 3 chairs and 5 restraint extenders to keep him strapped in safely. But it would all be worth it. He would go down in galactic history as part of the team that made first contact, and perhaps with another Death Force species on the cluster, they'll be able to push for reforms to accommodate species of size. Their space station is huge, the pilot commented, pulling up the scans the ambassadorial ship had sent after the first day of negotiations. About your size, actually, Urok. You should be able to stand up more or less straight once we get there. Might have to duck through doorways. Anyways, you're scheduled to talk with some of their biologists, while the legal boys discuss treaties and such. Get a general overview of their homeworld, how it compares to the galactic average. We're not looking for details or complex stuff, just things like if they have predators, if they can handle much variation in the way of gravity or temperature, if they can handle basic toxins, that kind of stuff. We don't want a repeat of the Tora incident. Urok grimaced at the reference. He had been taught it in school. Some half-baked ambassador had offered to host the uplift ceremonies on their own ship, as Kier was insufferably warm for the Eferti. Unfortunately, they hadn't factored that because Kier was uniformly hot, slightly less than halfway between the melting and boiling point of water, the bird-like natives couldn't feel temperature and died of hypothermia before even making it to the banquet set out in their honour, which it was later discovered would have killed them anyways. Relations had never recovered, and that entire galaxy was considered a no-fly zone, in the hopes they would forget about the disastrous first contact before developing spaceflight on their own. The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps attached. Eferti inertial dampeners were good against predicted acceleration, but didn't handle even light impacts well, and the humans had not developed gravitic binders yet. Good luck, Urok. From what I hear, you might need it. Urok stooped out of the ship and into the decontamination chamber. Nothing happened. This is Urok's Skullhammer. Xenobiologist Class 4 requesting permission to enter the ship, he said. He could feel his mouth and tongue moving in strange patterns to mimic the human speech, the implant in his brain translating the words he intended to say in his native tongue of Mora into sounds the humans could understand. It would take some time to get used to, but the human speech was actually not that different from his own. Much easier than speaking Eferti West. I think I might need decontamination. To his surprise, the door slid open without a toxic mist, and the human on the other side entered the chamber with him. Urok was somewhat disappointed with his first exposure to them. These were Death Warders. They were taller than the galactic average, granted, but the human barely came up to his neck, and their shoulders were far too narrow. They probably massed half as much as even a small orc. Their skin was visibly thin. They likely couldn't even withstand a bite from a Qualem without drawing blood. They had no natural weapons, no giant fangs like the orc retained for millennia of wrestling prey and biting over mating rights, a practice they had long abandoned, but was still etched into their genome in some old places. No claws or horns. How could something so mediocre survive a death world? It took him a second to realise the human was sizing him up at the same time. That actually surprised him. Most species either lacked the instinct to gauge threats entirely, or considered him so terrifying they fled before he could even speak. Orcs were the only sapient he was aware of that would try to study a threat. It was unsettling, actually. He had a very real sense the human was considering what it would take to kill him. He would have to make more of an effort to not do that in the future. The human spoke first, motioning at the nozzles on the wall. No need for decon, son. Bio boys already did a quick scan. Most of the microbes these little guys got on them couldn't give us more than a sniffle. Your bugs are a bit nastier, but they sent us scans of them ahead of time. We got vaxxed against the ones that could make the jump. Urok was a bit impressed. Most species never developed vaccination as their immune systems were too delicate to handle repeated exposure. They simply developed mass quarantine and culling until they reached nanite immunology. That the humans would be able to handle Morag bacteria was impressive indeed. Also a bit concerning, since it meant their pathogens were so horrific, they had to fight an immune arms race, but he had medbay patch his immune nanites, which took ages given how much blood there was in an orc. Should be fine. I hear you're the orc. All the little guys keep saying we got a lot in common. Gotta say, I see where they're coming from. You're a big un. Name's Carl, by the way. Uruk nodded compulsively, the implant in his brain adjusting his body language in the same way it changed his speech. Nice to meet you. I'm Uruk, ship's biologist. I was told that I'll be meeting with a human biologist to work out standards. We've had issues in the past. Trade goods that were too radioactive or toxic. Homos with dangerous temperature variations, that sort of thing. That has caused issues with first contact. Carl nodded and gestured for Uruk to follow. Or at least that's what the implant told him. Still unsettling. Yeah, we're down in Lab 3. This ain't really an ambassadorship, this is a research facility. I'm trying to figure out how some of the animals from home handle being off Earth. Now that we got Slipspace drives working, it's kind of important. Glad you're a tougher sort. Some of the earlier ones split when they saw the bay. The human swiped a flat piece of plastic on his chest against a section of wall, which slid open to reveal cages. Lots and lots of cages of different types of materials. Some were wire mesh, some were glass. One appeared to be made of some thin fabric. They were arrayed across multiple tables with different creatures inside. We're seeing how they handle the recirculated air. Humans can't smell very well, it doesn't bother us a bit, but some of them got a real keen sense and the stress gets to them. Even with slit space, it still takes a couple of months to get to the nearest star. Uruk approached the nearest cage, holding what appeared to be a qual lem with pointy ears and fur. What is this creature called? He asked, gesturing. That's a cat. He's friendly, but you gotta take it slow. He doesn't know what an orc smells like. Might spook him. Here, stick your fingers up against the bars. Cheers, Carl said, holding up his bottle. The brain implant told Uruk to do the same, lightly tapping his own bottle before taking a drink. Not bad, Uruk said with a nod. Somewhat mild, but refreshing. Does the captain know you're fermenting ethanol aboard his ship? Heck, half our funding comes from Budweiser, trying to brew space beer, like they think it'd be economical on Earth. Might even be if they ever get that skyhook working, Carl said, tilting the bottle back and drinking about half in one go. This stuff's pretty weak, but we're working on it. Maintaining fake gravity is expensive, and culturing the yeast to go in 0G. Plus, I ain't much of a brewmaster, and it's still expensive getting equipment up here. Anything we can't print or fab ourselves out, asteroid mining costs a couple grand per kilo. Maybe if the Diplo boys get everything ironed out, you can take a vacation on terra firma, take a tour of Germany or somewhere where they brew beer properly, or try some distilled spirits. Uruk tilted the bottle back and finished it before grabbing another. Most species in the cluster couldn't consume alcohol at all, and orcs were the only ones who could handle more than a few milliliters at a time, so even these piss-water beers, as Carl called them, was a bit of a treat for him. And Uruk had to admit that the idea of weaker spirits that could be consumed as a beverage instead of a drug was a novel concept that might trade well with the orcs. I think I'd like that. Now, back to what you were saying. Your uncle raised what for food? Emu, Carl said with a laugh. About 50 years ago or so, a bunch of eggheads said these giant birds taller than me were going to be the next big exotic meat, and my uncle always dreamed of making it big. He bought a whole breeding stock, thought he'd be rich. Instead, they ate him out of house and home, and he couldn't give that meat away. Well, he could, actually. He freezer-packed it and gave it as gifts for every holiday for years. Carl hooted with laughter and slapped his knee, grabbing another beer to replace the one he finished. What I really miss were the eggs, though. Those things like eggs the size of my head. You could fry up one of them and have breakfast for the whole family. Fascinating, Rock said with a nod. He rubbed his chin contemplatively. I had a third cousin do something similar. He believed that Urzok pellets would be quite valuable and dedicated a large portion of his family estate to setting up a hunting preserve for them. Unfortunately, he did not realise that they can leap 6 times their height in the air from a standstill and climb trees besides. Not only did the pellets become worthless when synthetics were developed, but most of his investment literally ran away. He hunted the few he could find, but barely recouped a small portion of his losses. Shoot. Sounds like I'd love to set up a blind on Morag, Carl said, flipping through pictures of some of the fauna that Uruk had brought in his data slab. Is that a lizard deer? That's a Goron. They grow a new point to their horn every mating season. That one was 5 cycles old. When I was a boy, my great-uncle taught me to hunt them. Traditionally it's done with spears, but as I was a boy, I was allowed to spring-load a spear gun, Uruk said, glad to finally have a companion who could appreciate his hunting stories. The visit with the humans was proving to be far more pleasant than he had expected. He sincerely hoped the Efferti didn't muck up the diplomacy, because he could see trade with the humans being very lucrative indeed. So, it was the height of the cool season, where the Goron began to shed their scales. My uncle showed me how to track them by their shed scales, and how to tell each Goron scales apart. So a trap onto a cliffside.